Welcome to the broadcast, my dear old fruits. It seems that our Meghan Markle takes after a character from Willy Wonka. Do you remember Slugworth? Who was after the recipe for the everlasting gobstopper and so desirous of a golden ticket that he would go about any kinds of mischief and marauding and monstrosities to get on in there. And that's exactly what Meghan has been doing with the fashion world, and we find this out from the lips of her dear pal Pipi Petit Pois Paolo Petroli, straight from his lips. He spoke to the cut. Remember the cut? It appears that Meghan imposed herself on Paris. Paris didn't want Meghan. No designer invited the girl. No house, no atelier of great reputation tried to procure her or her services as the merchantess of Marseille. The merchantess of Venice Beach. No, they did not. They didn't want her there. It was actually the Duchess who had to resort to reaching out and conspiring with the disgraced House of Balenciaga. And, I call them disgraced. They've been cancelled. I don't really give a fuck about the whole thing, to be quite honest with you. I mean, scandal. You build a bridge and get over it, my dear, so I wish them all the best. But PP said, Meghan and I met some years ago, and we've been texting ever since. Not speaking? Don't you trust each other enough to speak? Just communicating by text, very sad. She reached out and said she'd love to come to the show. There was no strategy or big orchestration. Of course there wasn't, my dear. No. All just so natural. Oh yeah, I'll just hop on a jet, bring my duvets with me, swaddle myself in your sheets, and garner the attention of the world's press for being and looking so stupid. Well, perhaps there was no big orchestration from you, darling PP. We can believe that, but you say, I didn't tell anyone she was coming because I wanted it to stay a surprise. In fashion, real surprises are rare, and this one was beautiful. If you say so, darling, so. What I would love to know, and I'm sure many of my fruits would love to know, is who exactly funded this expedition then? Did Meghan really have to pay for the round trip herself, the hotel, the extravaganza, the 10,000-mile round trip? If it was at her suggestion, what did you give her apart from a few clothes that no one else wanted to wear? Because I think Travelist would have a few words to say about this. The one he's involved with that lectures everybody on all their green credentials. Do you really need to use that private jet? Do you really need to parachute in all around the globe? Well, apparently your wife does, darling. She really does, in order to hustle those buns. The runways of LA won't do for the girl. She needs Europe. She needs to procure Europe. And therefore 10,000 miles will just have to be what it is. Because they need me. They need Meghan and Markle in the fashion world. Well, we're not buying it, my dear. Just to play dress up overseas. Wiggle your bony ass about Paris, I don't know. You see, in Nutmeg World, in her nutty old world, she's doing PP and Balenciaga and Paris a great big favour. And all of the fashion industry, this is the way that she has managed to justify it to herself, you see. She gets this flurry of cheap attention, and it may offer Balenciaga some very short-term benefits, it gets in the headlines, fair enough, although it's very vulgar for anybody in the know. It doesn't impress us, but long-term, that is where it is actually damaging. And the houses of Paris know this. Look at what happened to Burberry. Okay, that was an English brand, British brand, Burberry, a traditional, respected brand, and then along came the likes of Daniela Westbrook, who I'm sure is a charming young lady, but, started cladding her whole family in the design, and sales went through the roof. Of course they did, because every chav in the country, every commoner, with no disparagement to the hoi polloi, everyone has value, but, it brought a different sort of association to a cherished heritage brand, and a few years down the line, the damage reputationally didn't do any favours to the brand whatsoever, and it was in quite some danger for quite some time. So Paris will know this. They're looking. I won't even mention Jaguar and that rebrand. Although secretly, to be honest with you, I checked out some of those blue and pink cars. Not that I know anything about cars, and actually, I rather enjoyed some of what they came up with. But the adverts themselves, the new rebrand, the commercials for them were entirely vulgar, weren't they, and hideous. Didn't do much favours to the brand, but you know. Could you just imagine, and this is actually rather satisfying, all these years she's been sitting home waiting for the invitations from Dior and Givenchy and who else is French, I don't know, Chanel, Lacroix, City Lacroix, all of these houses. And what she got? Tumbleweed. Tumbleweed, darling. You know, they might throw you a few crumbs here or there, or your husband a suit or whatever, but they know really where their bread's buttered, and it's not on the side of vulgarity. So what does she do? She doesn't get them coming to her, she goes crawling. She goes crawling to the pariah house of the fashion world, Balenciaga. You know, it was in a pariah state. Nobody would touch it with a barge pole. As I say, I don't give a fuck. I really don't care. And I wish them all the best, but it was suffering from great reputational damage. So what did they have to lose? Anything for a bit of attention, right, my dear? Anything to divert away from other sinister headlines, even if it means bringing in a court jester or a clown, but not even at their own invitation, at her behest. Texting away. Oh, I just fancy a trip to Paris. Daniel Martin, where's my makeup? Where's my glam squad? PP, we're coming. The entire scenario illustrates Meghan's desperation for relevancy and association. She's scrambling. And she might be successful at it to some sort of degree. And her husband, as you know, he's been scrambling. They're scrambled Megs on toast. Scrambling all over the place to keep the royal link, the royal association in Harry's case. With Meghan, she wants to associate herself with high fashion. To all the girls, this world is yours. Do everything you can to protect your rights. Use your voice. Support each other. We will do the same for you. It's your right and our responsibility. Go get 'em, girl. Happy International Day of the Girl. Oh, do hush up, woman. I can just picture you at home. H, why is there no St. Meghan's Day yet? I think it's racism. And why have I not been canonized? That's what I want to know. In fact, you could get your pa, your beloved pa, who is not my king. No, he's not indeed. I'm his queen. Get your pa to make Pope Leo grant me a sainthood when he visits the Holy See later in the year. Yes, that's what I want. Canonization and a saint's day for Meghan Rachel. Saint Nutmeg. She's a windbag, this gal. She's full of hot air, like a putrid fart. On the one hand, she's been warning everybody about the dangers of the digital age, her fears for children, and the use of excessive screen time harming family life. And then in a trice, she is teasing the press with vignettes of Princess Elizabeth gambling about the garden, invading her own privacy, invading her own children's privacy, using her children to play this little game of hide and seek with the press and with everybody else to draw attention to her own machinations. And still the awards and trophies and accolades come along. Do you remember she won that award a couple of years ago, wasn't it? Glow Steinem. And I happen to like Glow Steinem, what I know of her. I think I told you that I also really loved her cameo in And Just Like That. I thought she was a fabulous, lovely lady. Well, she's been sucked in, hasn't she, by old Nutmeg. And you can just imagine their conversation. Look, Andy Glow, Aunt Glow. Another trophy for humanitarianism this time. Aren't I wonderful? And Aunt Glow, I'm ready to shoulder your legacy. The time will come in the not too distant to pass on your legacy, and I will shoulder that for you, Aunt Glow. I will run with the flame. I will burn with the baton of your success, and I'm more than ready to take that mantle back to Montecito and my mantelpiece. Fighting for women, Aunt Glow. Oh, my darling Aunt Glow. Let's hug. Yeah. She was swamped in a selection of garments which on anybody else would look really, really chic, but can I please ask, what is the belt's purpose? This belt was birthed into the world, created by some sort of garment manufacturer or creator, artisan, and it was deprived of its destiny because I do not see a cinch, I do not see a shape. All I see is it being used to ruin the line of the overcoat like some sort of tie cord on a sack of spuds. And I'm sure, very sure, that the coat is expensive cashmere. I don't know who it's by, and probably something that I could never afford and be quite jealous of. You know, some quiet luxury going on. And yet she manages to make it look like some sort of cheap old felt overcoat, some duster from Temu, doesn't she? How does she manage that? Do you understand? It looks like it was once white and put in the dark wash. It's just the way that she wears it. And she was with one of her security guards. I mentioned that I thought the one she was with in Paris, if it was a guard, was really handsome, lovely. Hello, do feel free to reach out. Which wasn't Marcus Anderson, by the way. One of you said, are you talking about Marcus? No, I wasn't speaking about him. I know that she was together with him at the show, but she had a handsome bodyguard. This time, well, he looks tough, doesn't he, this one? He looks like your mate Nigel. Oh, Gloria, darling, I happen to like you. From what I know of you, you seem like a very lovely lady, but have a word with our Gloria Hunniford, because she wouldn't stand for any of Nutmeg's nonsense on stilts, and she'd put you right, you know, from one glow to another. And then we have yet another sucker, fierce defender of Meghan, and that is Chrissy Teigen. And I'm using her pronunciation. I know others say Teigen. She says Teigen. So that's what I'll get on with. She told people that she really adores Meghan. She said she really is such a kind, good person that wants the best for all her friends and the best for people around her and the best for her own relationship and for her children. Well, I'm hearing a lot of best for her within that sentence. Well, Chrissy dear, if that's all lived experience, I won't disabuse you of it, but wanting the best for you and yours shouldn't come at the expense of others, because she has no qualms with trampling all over the joys of others and the reputations of other innocents, does she? And that is why we will put up a robust defence of those who truly do not deserve such treatment. I'm quite sure, Chrissy dear, I'm quite sure that she can put on the charm and charm the bees out the trees. I've told you, I'm sure I'd have a good old gay old time with her myself, making lavender pillows and doing a bit of cooking. I'm sure she's a great gossip, have lots of fun with all of that, you know. Lots of these characters can be wonderful fun, very charming, and create a bit of a buzz. But if one won't fit in to Meghan's story as she sees it, then you're iced. You're out. She's done with you. You're betrayed, you're mocked, you're thrown to the wolves, and then she'll accuse you of doing that to her, be it king or kingdom. She takes no prisoners. Her husband hasn't been quite as well defended this week because even his lawyers have been chastised and scolded by Judge Mr. Justice Nicklin, who is not happy with Harry's legal team. This High Court judge criticised the unorthodox approach of the representatives of the 7 claimants, including Prince Harry, along with Dame Elton of the John, and several others who are suing associated newspapers for 30-year-old alleged breaches of privacy. Justice Nicklin has been suggesting that lawyers for these 7 claimants had shown a fundamental misunderstanding of the scope of the litigation. So, in other words, you're reaching. You're reaching, my dears. You might have had some sort of point, but now you are spicing the meal with all kinds of unsavoury sauces. The judge has ordered that the allegations that associated newspapers had commissioned burglaries to order and that Catherine had been under target by journalists must be removed from the claim in no uncertain terms. Isn't that something? Now, I'll confide in you, I happen to adore some of those 7 claimants. Liz Hurley for one, and Sadie Frost for second. Yeah, I absolutely adore them in particular. But Mr. Justice Nicklin is insisting that the civil litigation does not stray into the realm of a public inquiry. That's his fear. He wants to set boundaries for this case, and he says, put bluntly, it has become a complex and involved sideshow. Harry's team are expected to appeal. Of course they are. They'll drag it on for as long as they can. The trial is expected to begin in January. But the question that seems to be emerging is, what is it that Harry really wants out of this? Does he want justice? Does he want revenge? Or does he want Money, 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 money. The filthy lucre. I rest my case. Now, do you remember a few months ago I got my pins out for you and displayed my body in a gown at Cliveden? It was during my summer stay at Cliveden. Do you remember that, my dear? As well as that vignette that I did for you. I think I recorded 1 or 2 shows there for you as well. Oh, it was so hot. It was a nightmare to record. Absolutely sweltering it was. But yeah, I was there showing you and staying in the suite that Meghan stayed in on the eve of her wedding. Do you remember? So there was a connection where I wanted to show you. Well, I was at Cliveden, I adore Cliveden, and the Queen has been at Cliveden, dressed a little more demurely than me, I suppose you could say, for the Cliveden Library Festival of 2025. Now, this was a reception for authors and festival supporters, charity partners and students who are from the London Academy of Excellence, Tottenham. And the Queen recounted the rich history of Cliveden just as I did, actually, during her speech, which is quite amusing, really. Do you see how we move in the same circles, spaces, faces? Yeah, this is how the circle turns, do you understand? There are few houses and gardens in England that are quite as steeped in history as this one. This is what Queen Camilla said in her speech. She said, Rudyard Kipling stayed in the early 1910s. J.M. Barrie enjoyed strolling in the woods. George Bernard Shaw briefly came to escape the Blitz. The estate is praised in Jerome K. Jerome's 3 Men in a Boat. It inspired Kenneth Grahame to write The Wind in the Willows, and I understand that it is even possible to order Ian Fleming's Vesper Martini at the bar, a drink that was a favourite of the late, much-missed Dame Jilly Cooper. Nice of her to mention Dame Jilly there, who we both adored. The Queen and I both adored Dame Jilly very much. And, yeah, she mentions there Ian Fleming in his association with Cliveden. And another place I stayed at, I might have mentioned to you before, is Braziers Park in Oxfordshire. Not this year, but in the past I've stayed there, and that was the childhood home, or at least the nursery home, of Ian Fleming, the writer of James Bond. It was the house, or one of the houses, of his father, Valentine Fleming. And we used to use the library there for meditations, and that room was the room that was used as a nursery for Ian Fleming. I don't know why I'm throwing in that trivia, but yeah, I highly recommend Braziers Park for retreats, stays, cosy rest and retreats and relaxation, this kind of thing, especially in the winter when it's very cold there, but very, very cosy with gorgeous homemade food that you have to share in the washing up. Now, I thought this was worth mentioning because I think it's so beautiful. It's an artefact from the early 16th century that was marked with an H and a K, and it was found 6 years ago by a metal detector newbie enthusiast. He'd only been into metal detecting for 6 months, Charlie Clark, who owns a cafe in Birmingham area. And this find was 24 karat gold, obviously, 500-600 years old, and it may have been created for a tournament in 1518 to mark the betrothal of King Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon's daughter, Princess Mary, to the French heir. And as you can see, it features the Tudor rose, which is always so delicious. It's the floral heraldic emblem of England, and it combines the red rose of the House of Lancaster and the white rose of the House of York. It's beautiful, isn't it? And then the other symbol, or badge, represents Catherine of Aragon. It's a pomegranate or pomegranate bush, a bush to represent darling Catherine. And then the inscription there is a pun on the Old French for always, which is really rather romantic. But it's quite a chunky piece, isn't it? Quite something there. The British Museum, you see, have launched a campaign to buy it at market value, which they say is £3.5 million. And I know that's a lot, but I actually think that sounds rather cheap for such a rare piece. I thought it would be worth something more than that, actually. But under the Treasure Act in the kingdom, when something is declared treasure like this, then it becomes property of the Crown. However, the proceeds are likely to be shared by, as well as the Crown, the discoverer of the item and the landowner. So this Charlie Clark is still set to become a millionaire, whether it's sold to the British Museum if they manage to raise the funds for it. If not, it'll go to a private collector, and I think it'll actually be more lucrative in terms of financial recompense if it goes to a private collector. But I thought it was rather special and very beautiful with the deep gold and red colouring. So gorgeous. Oh, H, oh, Harry, my King Henry the Ninth, my darling boy, Christmas is coming. Not Christmas, the holidays. Actually, the public aren't listening, so yeah, I'll just call it what I call it in private, Christmas. Christmas is coming, Harry. Of course it is. And I'm feeling romantic. Catherine had a rose made for her this year for charity. Catherine's rose. Well, now's your opportunity to invoke Meghan's rose, isn't it, my dear? Because I want Henry's heart is what I'm going to call my new locket. Henry's heart should belong to me. So get your finger out, get your wallet out, boy, and we can sell copies of it on QVC. A little dose of the Yorkies now, who have been showing off their sartorial splendour, with Princess Beatrice, accompanied by darling Ejo, at the Art of Wishes Gala at the Chancery Rose Hotel. She was wearing the Vampire's Wife, which was the label created by darling Susie Cave, wasn't it? Which I think actually ceased trading, didn't it, a year or two ago? But she paired it with black satin heels, and I thought that it looked an absolute rave. It was called the Wild Rose Midi Dress. And then we have Princess Eugenie, wearing Ralph Lauren in the colour Botanic Green, with a burgundy shoulder bag by Chloe Fay and disco mushroom earrings. Eugenie was accompanied by Princess Rajwa Al Hussein, who is the wife of the Crown Prince of Jordan, heir to the throne. And so she was in good company there. They were trotting along to the Springfield University Hospital in London, where they viewed art from the charity hospital rooms. And together they toured Hauser and Wirth Art Gallery, of which Princess Eugenie is a director. The engagement was full of goodwill, and I thought Eugenie looked absolutely splendid. The king has saved the world. Conker championships. Don't ever say that he's a lazy king, because he's up to all kinds of tricks, and we love Conkers, don't we? This was on the eve of the 60th anniversary of the World Conker Championships, and there were fears that a shortage of Conkers would mean that the competition would be cancelled this year, and we couldn't be having that. So the king came to the rescue with 300 fine Conkers sent to the organisers from Windsor Castle, and this donation has been picked from the grounds of the castle and sent via the PR department, because the normal collectors of the Conkers had reported that the large competition standard Conkers that are required were in very short supply this year. And there was quite a bit of scandal surrounding the competition last year, because the men's winner was accused of switching his Conker for a metal one. Can you fancy it? The Conker is, of course, the seed of the horse chestnut tree, and we like to speak of nature, don't we, my dear? So it's worth mentioning horse chestnut trees because they're very beloved. And I remember winning Conker competitions in the days of the Brownies and Cubs, and I was surprisingly quite good at it. I think we used to varnish the Conkers as well to toughen them up. But yeah, I wasn't too bad at that, all marbles. There was a wonderful horse chestnut near my home which heralded a little grove in which we'd all play as children. It was like the grand entrance to the grove in this beautiful idyllic village, and the ground would be rich with beautiful shiny mahogany conkers. If you're acquainted with those trees and these fruits, these seeds, these conkers, you'll know how satisfying it is to see them ripen or come into season. You split them and out you squeeze this beautiful shiny conker and have lots of fun with it. And it's very sad now because that tree has gone. It makes me sad every time I pass that area to see that it's no longer there, no longer fit for purpose, and been replaced by all sorts of other modern vulgarities. But my entire childhood was populated by the horse chestnut tree around my childhood home, but also smattered all over the school playing fields with their blooms that would come in and out of season together with the conkers. So I rarely meet, or I should say I rarely notice them these days. I'm sure I pass them all the time in our parks here. But conkers and the trees from which they bloom and sprout and fall are really rather magical. I also rather enjoy, in very small quantities, sweet chestnuts roasted on an open fire, which you tend to find here in the kingdom when you walk around those medieval cities and towns I tell you about that put on the Christmas markets, which will be coming in the not too distant future. And you usually get a stand where they're roasting away all these chestnuts for a frosty evening, and you have a couple of them washed down with some mulled wine. This is all what's coming around the corner. Cosy, 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 wonderful. In fact, you find them at German street markets which spring up here at Christmas time as well. They're very popular here. The German markets come along, and it's a German state visit that's coming up round the corner, because the President of Germany, accompanied by his wife Elke, is going to be paying a state visit to the kingdom, hosted by His Majesty the King from the 3rd to the 5th of December. This will be the first inbound state visit by a German president in 27 years, and the 5th since 1958. Now, you might recall that the President hosted their Majesties for a state visit to Germany, and we all enjoyed that, didn't we? Do you remember the glittering state banquet a couple of years ago? So let's see what gems and gowns are in store this time around in December. Thank you for your company, my dear old fruit. I look forward to seeing you next time. Leave me a juicy comment, or if you fancy passing a conker or two my way, my tip jar is in the description box. Ta-ra, my dears, and toodle pip.